Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Oh, it's been a while. Welcome to the first in-person Collingswood Public School board meeting in a while. I officially call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided at the appropriate places. Am I supposed to do the gavel? This is all new to me. There we go. I promise I won't do that again. Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Chu?
Here.
Mr. Craig?
Here.
Ms. Henry? Here. Ms. Mello?
Here.
Ms. Rivera? Here. Mrs. Savarino? Here. Mrs. Sheridan Celia? Here. Mr. Stotts?
Here.
And Mrs. Caden?
Here. Next, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Working with that, and Dr. McDowell, I'm going to have you start.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you to the board for the opportunity to share restarting and reinventing Collingswood and Oakland Public Schools. So what we've prepared for you is more of a summary of the events, the investments, the actions, and also the sources of information that we have continued to use in order to inform our plan. Some of the information will be what you have already seen based on the community information sessions. Some of it is based on the latest information that has been updated since our reopening plan was released publicly on August 4th. And this is also a precursor for the reopening, the updated reopening plan and the FAQs that will be released tomorrow for the community. So we're just going to jump right in. So we always, as a district leadership team, we always start with our mission. Our mission is by embracing the strength inherent in a diverse student body, Collingswood and Oakland school districts will inspire our students to develop confidence, critical thinking, creativity, and perseverance. We encourage our students to focus on their academic and personal growth one day at a time. Our theme this year is and will continue to be patience and grace, which we shared in our school community information sessions, with a heavy emphasis on patience. This is a challenging time for us all, and we are thankful and appreciative for the patience and grace that our school community has shown us, and hopefully will continue to show us as we navigate through some very challenging circumstances with one goal in mind. How do we successfully open schools and keep them open so that our children can receive the full benefit of their education? So in order to prepare for the safe return, schools have to monitor 4 core areas: community transmission, vaccination coverage, testing, and outbreaks. So when we think about where are we getting our information from, we are leveraging it from multiple sources. Some of those we're going to cover this evening. The first is the COVID activity level index, which is a regional indicator for Camden County, Gloucester, Burlington, and Salem County. Current data shows that 17.64 cases per 100,000, which categorizes us in high transmission. So we are moderate as a region, but in terms of as a county, we are very much in high transmission. and that is confirmed with the COVID data tracker, which is another form of data that we use from the CDC, which really breaks it down and looks at it county-specific and breaks down the number of cases in order to come to these distinctions. We're also looking at vaccinations. So when we think about the Camden County as a whole, total number of vaccinations for eligible individuals within our population that have had one dose is 62%. Fully vaccinated is 54.7% for Camden County. For young people ages 12 and over, it is 73.4% with one dose, and fully vaccinated 64.2%. When you break that down exclusively to Collingswood, and we are still waiting for Oakland numbers as well as Woodland numbers, Collingswood number of students that have been vaccinated 12 and over, at least one dose, is 72%, and Collingswood children that are fully vaccinated is 68%. So this is something to celebrate. This means that our students and their families are taking this seriously. They want to get back to as close to normal as possible, and this is one of many strategies that can help us get there. When we think about the additional areas, testing, this is a sample of a COVID screening testing strategy that we are using to inform our comprehensive strategy. So the New Jersey Department of Health has outlined testing strategies as part of a comprehensive but preventative approach. Due to the current rate of transmission in Camden County, weekly universal screening is now strongly recommended. We will be working with an approved vendor to implement a tiered system of testing across all schools, with increased testing frequency and sample size being based on transmission rate and grade band, and will be adjusted regularly based on viral prevalence. Additional details and parent consent forms and processes for how this will be made available, not just to students and staff, but also to community members that we serve, will be included in our back-to-school information packages next week and throughout the first several weeks when kids are back on campus. So when we think about comprehensive COVID testing, that also includes vaccination. So the vendors that we are working with will also have the opportunity to provide vaccination for those who choose it. But we will be looking at a multi-tiered approach, which will include pooled testing as well as rapid testing, and a combination thereof, which is grade band appropriate. We do not want our youngest learners to have a fear of coming to school. So we're going to take a little bit more time in order to figure out how do you strike the appropriate balance while still maintaining a layered approach to health and safety. Monitoring of outbreaks is that fourth category, and I wanted to just share a few pieces of data, especially in the midst of a constant flow of information that can oftentimes be extremely confusing. So state-level reports are what we are leaning heavily on, but when you look at that across all of the reporting states, which is about 25 states, nearly 4.8 million children have tested positive for COVID-19 since the onset of the pandemic. This translates on a weekly basis, which is a 7-day average of last week, there being over 200,000 new cases of children. This is probably consistent with the starting of schools in many of the southern states. Many of the schools in the Northeast have yet to start school. We're taking a different approach in northern states than we are in southern states. So I don't want to infer or draw conclusions that are not in evidence, but there seems to be a consistent theme that in environments where there was not a multi-layered approach to health and safety, there are significant surges in COVID infections, which then translate into isolations and quarantine, which then translates into hospitalizations. As a school community, we have continued to follow the science. Our families have been both well-educated and very pragmatic about all of the issues. They've pushed us in different areas, and they've really forced us to be very strategic, but also to be very intentional about how we strike the appropriate balance, and we will continue to do that. When we think about the continued monitoring of outbreaks, I think it's important to understand not just raw numbers, but also percentages. So when we think about the significant increase over the last several weeks, roughly 22% of all COVID cases in this country are children under the age of 18. That's a significant uptick. That's a 9% increase from 2 weeks prior. So as a country, we're shifting in the wrong direction. As a region, we're seeing slight shifts in the wrong direction, but with controlled environments and the appropriate mitigation strategies, we are confident that we will get there. But patience and grace is definitely necessary as we think about how to move this work forward. Now, albeit very low, hospitalizations across the country are increasing among school-aged children. But we don't want to present any environment that increases hospitalization of any child within our community. So we continue to hear about the Delta variant. So here's what we know so far. And I preface so far because when we think about a constantly evolving public health crisis, we are operating under the assumption that all things are subject to change. So that's what we are planning for. So what we know so far is that the Delta variant is more contagious, up to 2 times than previous variants. Some data suggest that it might cause more severe illness in unvaccinated people, and in unvaccinated people remain the greatest concerns, but also fully vaccinated people can also have what's called breakthrough infections. What this is translated into, even within our community, is that fully vaccinated individuals are contracting COVID, and many are actually experiencing symptoms, albeit less severe. But that also means that those who are contracting COVID as a breakthrough infection can still transmit the virus, which in unvaccinated people is 8 to 9 times more transmissible. So we want to make sure that we are following the science on a regular basis, that we are making the appropriate adjustments whenever possible, but that we are also very cognizant that we are very much still in the midst of a global pandemic. So when we think about the priorities, we have shared in multiple events, as well as the reopening plan, the 10 core priorities that we're using to inform our safe return: closing of the digital divide, strengthening of blended and distance learning, assessing what students need and where students are, ensuring that there is social emotional learning prevalent in every school, redesigning schools for stronger relationships, and then ultimately emphasizing culturally responsive learning, thinking about ways to expand the learning time without there being an excessive burden on students or families, establishing community schools and wraparound supports for those who need them, preparing our educators for the reinvention of school, and ultimately leveraging our funding so that the dollars and the resources reach our students to meet their needs. Sources of information include, but are not limited to, the New Jersey Department of Public Health, the Centers for Disease Control, the World Health Organization, the American Academy of Pediatrics, community conversations, as well as technical assistance from some of our local residents who are public health experts, infectious disease specialists, as well as pediatricians, school nurses, and public policy individuals among our educators, district administrators, as well as school board members. Health and safety. Will students be required to wear masks? Yes, per the executive order from Governor Phil Murphy, as well as the data that we have been using to inform our strategy. All students, educators, staff, and visitors will be required to wear masks inside all school buildings, regardless of vaccination status, for the start of the 2021-22 academic year. Keeping in mind, as new information comes out, as we learn more about this virus, all things are subject to change. Will staff be required to be vaccinated? Yes. Effective October 18th, all pre-K through 12 school personnel are required to be fully vaccinated or undergo regular testing at a minimum of 1 to 2 times per week. We will be working closely with our education associations in order to think about what does implementation look like and how do we ensure that we're not just meeting this as a compliance activity, but also thinking about what's in the best interest of students and staff. Will accommodations be made? As prefaced in our school community information sessions, the answer is yes. Child study team case managers and counselors will work with school nurses and families in order to identify for students with or without learning differences appropriate alternatives either per their IEP, per their 504 plan, or per physician's directions and requests. Some of the areas or the accommodations would be based on things that would inhibit an individual's health. For example, extreme heat indoors. When an individual has trouble breathing, is unconscious or incapacitated, or otherwise unable to remove a mask without assistance. When a medical condition or physical challenge dictates or demands it. When the individual is under 2 years of age. When an individual is engaged in eating, drinking, or playing musical instruments. When individuals are engaged in high-intensity aerobic or anaerobic activity, or when students are in rigorous physical activity in health and physical education class, or when wearing a mask presents an unsafe situation as to when a student is operating very technical equipment and it could hinder their ability to remain safe. Will students need to socially distance? Yes, whenever possible. We have 9 campuses between our 2 school systems, and each campus is different. Each campus has different variables, different needs, and different bandwidth and capacity. So each school will have a unique approach to how we socially distance, but we're taking a multi-layered approach in order to ensure that we are significantly reducing the risk of students being infected. So elementary students will remain in cohorts throughout the school day with schedules established to reduce cohort mixing. And then the expectation is to maintain 3 feet of physical distancing or greater between students in classrooms combined with indoor masking. So we will continue to do that. In many of our spaces, we have removed non-essential furniture and classroom components in order to account for the young people to make sure that we are significantly reducing risk. Health and safety, will lunch be served at school? Yes, cafeterias will be open to serve all students, breakfast and lunch, at no cost to families this year. During meal times when masks cannot be worn, schools will implement a layered prevention strategy in order to reduce risk of exposure. Nurses will be available full-time in every school. Our nurses will continue to monitor public health data and implement evolving guidance throughout the year. They are leading the development and the ongoing updating of all of our health and safety protocols, and they will continue to be extremely vital resources in terms of answering of health-related questions and concerns. How are we maintaining healthy facilities? Thanks to the investments that have been approved by our boards of education, thanks to our building and grounds department, we're continuing to make investments in order to maintain healthy facilities. We've purchased additional personal protective equipment, as well as cleaning products, MERV 13 air filters, hydroxyl generators, and bipolar ionization air purifiers have been installed in key areas. Electrostatic sprayers are being used to clean high-touch areas and restrooms, and then all areas are being thoroughly cleaned and disinfected on a nightly basis, with all of our heating and ventilation equipment being monitored daily, with high-efficiency filters installed in all units, with increased run times in order to make sure that there is a fresh flowing of fresh air from the outside in our school buildings during times of occupancy and during times when students are also not in the building. The recommendation is that in many cases that the run times extend an hour to 2 hours beyond the time of occupancy. But in order to make sure that we have continued air flowing within our spaces during periods of occupancy, which is Monday through Friday, we are increasing our run times to 24 hours a day. Teaching and learning, the most important factor for why we are all here. So we're taking a comprehensive approach to the teaching and learning of our students in the midst of a pandemic, where we are not using the pandemic as an excuse for students not to be able to show growth and achievement. So where do we begin? This starts with pre-assessments. Pre-assessments does not necessarily mean testing. It means how do we appropriately identify what our students need and what's the most appropriate strategy to support such need. How are we prioritizing those state standards? How will we make progress? We will make progress by leaning heavily on our outstanding educators in their professional learning communities, by allowing our teachers to communicate what their needs are, what resources are needed in the pursuit of those New Jersey student learning standards, by giving them autonomy and flexibility in the classroom to meet the growing demands and needs of students that we have not yet brought back into our spaces, and really being very cognizant of the fact that some of our children have not physically been in a classroom in a year and a half, and they will require something different. Ongoing collaboration amongst each other to identify what works best for our students. How will we monitor progress? Assessment of daily learning objectives. This happens day in and day out in the classroom. Looking at our benchmark assessments, so over periods of time, looking at the units of study and seeing and evaluating where we are and what adjustments need to be made. And then ultimately leveraging the Start Strong diagnostic assessment, which will be administered in early October for grades 4 through 10 in English, grades 4 through 8 in math with algebra, geometry, and algebra 2 also, and then science in grades 6, 9, and 12 to really be able to identify where should we begin with some of our students in terms of filling in the gaps from the previous year while exposing all of our children to current grade level standards and content. And then ultimately leveraging the partnerships with some of our educational providers such as Common Lit, Imagine Math, College Board, in order to strike the appropriate balance to meet the needs of each and every student. Bringing back arts education. In order to provide a well-rounded education to our students, the arts is a critical component. So in elementary, we will be bringing back vocal music, instrumental music, band, and art, which will start in September. We will look at all of our safety protocols, and we will begin introducing instruments for band in early October. At the secondary level, we will continue to play music and sing indoors using specialized masks. And then regarding dates for performances, these will be looked at and evaluated on a case-by-case basis, keeping the health and safety of students, staff, as well as the audience in mind. Special Services will continue to provide the full gamut of programs and options for our students, including supplemental support, pull-out replacement, self-contained services, pre-vocational and vocational work, as well as transition programming. Any questions or concerns that families have regarding their child's IEP or regarding the level of related services that children are receiving, please reach out to your child's case manager. Our districts will continue to use a multi-tiered system of support in order to identify and support student need based on academic, social, emotional, and behavioral areas. The goal of this model and the refinement of this model is to improve student achievement by implementing appropriate, timely interventions in a way that addresses those areas of need, but also monitors progress and makes the adjustments whenever possible to make sure that students are continuing to move forward. So I want to also paint the picture of where we are in terms of our timeline. So back in April, we announced, as districts, we announced our goals for reopening, which is a safe return to full-time in-person learning in September. In June, we announced summer programming, which was created to serve as a bridge for students who have been disconnected and sometimes disengaged from the educational space and the learning process. August 4th, we released our initial reopening plan. We will be releasing an updated plan with the FAQs tomorrow. August 9th through the 19th, we had our summer camps, and you'll hear a little bit about that after this. And August 9th through the 23rd, we had our community information sessions where we not just talked about the district reopening, but we also talked about what does this mean for my child's school, specifically the logistics around reopening and the things that I really need to be aware of so that we can start the year strong. August 30th through 31st will be public board meetings with an opportunity for community members to provide public comment. September 1st, we will be welcoming back our staff, and then professional learning will begin. And the important work of meeting the needs of each and every student will also begin. And September 8th, the day that some of us are cheering for, others are holding our breaths for, is the first day of school. When we think about what can happen when we follow the science, when we put children first, and then we focus on their academic, social, and emotional needs, I think about our summer camps. Our summer camps were an opportunity for us to do a dry run, using the layered approach to our strategies. How do we bring children back? How do we make children feel welcome? But also, how do we engage our children as people and start to begin building those relationships with them? Our elementary sessions had a STEM focus, where there were opportunities for community visitations within Collingswood. There were read-alouds connected to the theme of astronomy and engineering. There was also arts integration alongside those read-alouds and STEM activities. Students got a chance to do yoga and Zumba and team-building exercises. We had 200 participants in our elementary sessions over that 2-week period. Our older students, our secondary sessions, there were 12 activities that included an environmental scavenger hunt in Knights Park, solar cars, dinosaur teeth exploration, knitting, yoga, trivia, indoor and outdoor sports, circus gymnastics. Guest groups included the Tri-State Therapy Dogs, the Cedar Run Wildlife Refuge, video game and soccer darts, Kona Ice, and ice cream. We had 85 participants. So we received lots of positive feedback from students. We received positive feedback from families. But there is a little secret that we're going to share during this public meeting. Our adults actually had more fun than the students. So we got nothing but positive reviews about the experience. And we will use what we've learned in our debriefs, our after-action planning sessions over the coming weeks, to think about what the follow-up to this, which will be the upcoming summer, because we have earmarked funds to be able to do a second round of summer camps, but we want to take it a step further. We believe that we will have an increase in participation, but for all intents and purposes, it was a successful endeavor. So I personally want to thank all of our educators who participated. I want to thank all of the families who were able to also participate, and we look forward to continued partnership as we open our schools September 8th. And I would like to put it back to our board president for questions that our board may have around school reopening.
So thank you, Dr. McDowell. We did this presentation during Committee of the Whole for the purpose of allowing all of the board members the freedom to ask questions, get some clarification on any particular issues. So that is what we're going to open it up to right now. So I have some things, but I'll hold off because others might want to ask their questions first. So if anyone has something they'd like to ask, Ms. Mello, would you like to start?
I have 2 questions, and they're not related, so I can do one and come back if that's better. I guess my first is, you mentioned a layered strategy for lunch. Can you say what that means? A layered strategy for security?
So in many of our schools, we have not offered lunch in a year and a half. So our cafeterias sat vacant for a considerable period of time. So I'm probably going to speak to one of our largest elementary schools because the numbers are easier to calculate in my head. So when we think about Tatum Elementary has roughly 270 students. And in a traditional year, they had 2 lunches. So there would be 135 students in the cafeteria each lunch period, with a portion of those children being inside, a portion of those children being outside. So one of the strategies that Tatum will be incorporating is they've added a 3rd lunch, and they've increased the number of lunches in order to reduce the number of students. So now there will be 90 students per lunch period, with 45 children in the cafeteria and 45 children outside, with there being alternate spaces used depending on what program a student may or may not be in. In addition, so when students are outside, the additional layer is that we are going to have supervised recess, where the expectation is that children socially distance to the greatest extent possible. But then while we're inside, students will be in assigned seats, spaced out, with their lunches provided. They will have a shorter window of time, but students will not be clustered together like they would in a traditional year. So we will be employing social distancing inside the cafeteria. Students will have a shorter window of unmasked exposure, and then students will be in assigned seats, for 1, for contact tracing, and 2, so that it reduces the amount of lag time so that children can spend the maximum amount of time eating, opposed to waiting in line or congregating in tight groups.
And that obviously looks a little bit different at each school.
Yes.
But there is a layered strategy. It looked like an extra lunch was added at middle school, I think I saw.
Yes, the middle school will also have additional lunches, and they are expanding the spaces where students will be able to have their lunch in open spaces where they can appropriately socially distance.
I might as well just do my other question, then I'll be done for the night. And it was about, it's a question maybe for state. Is the state giving us any kind of leeway around excused or unexcused absences as we go into kids that are going to have to isolate at home? Or I'm thinking of these really hot days where some kids won't be masked. Can students stay home? I know there's not a remote option. But is the state letting us have more absences, perhaps? Or?
No. So the state has really left that to school districts. And at the end of the day, the directions that they're giving us is follow your board policy. So we're currently looking at board policy, and we will exercise flexibility where appropriate, but we're still working through the details of what that actually will look like in practice.
I also have two questions, and I believe one of them you may not know right now, but feel free to get back to me. I understand we're using Start Strong to kind of assess post-pandemic or kind of post-pandemic digressions or needs for additional supports. But I'm wondering if we've seen an increase over the summer with 504 and IEP planning or needs post-pandemic, since now we're getting into post-pandemic on-site learning for the first time?
So we have not seen an increase in 504s. We have not seen a significant uptick in assessments towards IEPs either.
And I'm asking because I have a feeling that these assessments are going to lead to the need of more interventions, but I wouldn't want to categorize students who don't need certain support longer term. And so I'm wondering if those conversations have also started internally.
They have. So Start Strong, for the benefit of the audience, Start Strong is the assessment that the state used in order to get an approved waiver for not offering the New Jersey student learning assessments at the conclusion of last year. So they were granted a waiver by the U.S. Department of Education to be able to use Start Strong as an assessment which would count for the 2021 school year as a means to be able to identify student growth and development. So in areas where students have gaps, interventions will be put in place. In areas where there are no gaps, acceleration opportunities will be put in place. So we will be using that as one of many assessment options in order to see where students fall, with a heavier emphasis on learning acceleration.
Thank you. And my other question is definitely not related to that. You mentioned full-time nurses at each site, and for some reason I don't recall there being full-time nurses at all elementary schools. If I'm wrong, I'm maybe remembering wrong, but if so, have we hired more nurses?
So as of last year, we had full-time nurses at every campus except the preschool learning center at the church. She was part-time. So we now have full-time nurses at every campus. State statute requires us to have one full-time nurse per school district, but our organization felt that having nurses as a critical team member on every campus was really important.
We're just going to go down the line. Go ahead, Deanna.
My question, I guess, bounces off of Ms. Mello's question about the layered approach to lunches, but also the protocols in general. And I just wondered what steps have been taken to communicate all the additional requirements that these protocols will put on our staff, and has it been well received?
It has. So the majority of the protocols are still pretty consistent with what we have already come to know. There will be subtle tweaks, and those will be covered ad nauseum over the coming weeks. There's a whole host of situations that we are preparing for. The overwhelming majority of our educators, they're in the right headspace. They understand the environment that we're walking into, but they're also being very collaborative to make sure that we're able to tackle some of these items. We began those discussions about health and safety in each school community back in May and June. So we started the planning back then, and it has been collaborative since then, with recommendations being able to come forward. So we've really been, as a collective district, we've been wrestling with this for several months.
So also with, kind of following up with Ms. Mello's question, you talked about flexibilities, like at the middle school for lunch. I'm just curious, like what flexibilities will site leaders or principals have? Because I see lunch as probably one of the biggest obstacles that we're going to face this year. So just curious, what are some of those steps that site leaders can take in order to give as much distance and safety for kids eating lunch?
So I'll start with just a guiding philosophy. So in general, roughly 95% of most of the situational or the day-to-day decisions at schools really should be made at the local school site level among the educators with boots on the ground. They are positioned, they are better positioned to make those choices. What we are empowering our school leaders to do is to look at their facilities, look at the range of options that they have, and to be flexible about where they put students in unmasked environments, with an emphasis on social distancing to the greatest extent possible, areas that have high degrees of fresh air circulating within those spaces, but also so that students don't feel the disruption or the chaos or potential anxiety when we know that there's a natural propensity for them to socialize. So we want to take into consideration that children really need to socialize in order to be well-rounded, but we want to do it in a safe way. So for example, it's a nightmare for custodians, but the auditorium at the middle school will be one of the flexible spaces that we use because it has an expansive area with good airflow. Some of the outdoor spaces will be used. Some of the all-purpose spaces will be used. Some of the larger classrooms and libraries will be used to varying degrees, but it looks significantly different from campus to campus.
Sure. One of the things that you mentioned around testing when we were in high transmission areas, and I think it was random testing was going to be pulled, or different groups that would be pulled. I could be speaking wrong, just hearing this. Who's going to be deciding who gets pulled, and what are we doing to ensure there isn't bias in who's getting pulled for those tests?
So we're currently working through that. That really starts with the vendor. What is being recommended is that it is done, a random sample is done on every campus, starting at 10%, with weekly testing of random samples. What that translates into in most schools is 10 to 12 children. In some of our larger schools, 15 to 20 children. So really being mindful of logistics process that takes that into consideration. I prefaced earlier in our younger grades, so pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade, we really want to strike an appropriate balance with making sure that we are not instilling a sense of fear in our earliest learners. So we're going to take a softer approach with the youngest students.
Right. Last thing I had was, I'm one of those parents who was really happy with the SEL camps this summer. I thought they were great. My rising third grader loved it. Two things around that is just questions like, as this was a dry run, what did we learn about how these procedures were working with kids and receptiveness to kids and staff? And then any thoughts to next year expanding this so rising kindergartners can take advantage of this, particularly those who were in the pre-K system already?
It's a great question. So one of the things that we learned is that when you place a heavy emphasis on engaging children in activities that may be a bit outside of their comfort zone but still piques their interest, the phones get shut off, the laughters increase, the energy and the excitement also increases. But that also was mirrored by our staff. So our staff, they brought their A game. They came every day. They came excited. They came happy. They had real conversations with children, and they had a plan at the beginning of the day, but depending on how our children presented, if they needed to pivot or make adjustments, they did. And what happened was it was an ongoing conversation between the children and the staff, and that's really what made it so successful. So we're going to evaluate all of the things that went well during this summer's programs. We're going to keep those, and we're going to get rid of all of the things that didn't work so well.
Believe it or not, I have no questions.
That's a groundbreaking day. So I wanted to just ask a few questions that I know have been floating around out there for clarification. One of them being, it sounds, a lot of the guidance has always been open the windows for fresh air to come in. So can you clarify, again, why we are keeping our windows closed?
Right. So the general premise behind keeping the windows closed is so that we have filtered air. There has been a high degree of intentionality and investment in order to make sure that we have the appropriate filtering, that we're increasing the run times of fresh air, that we are looking at other ways in order to clean the air. In many cases, some of our students have allergies. There are allergens, mold spores, dust, and other components that creates an uncontrolled environment in addition to degrees of humidity that cannot be controlled when the windows are open. So the recommendation is that the windows stay closed unless there's a situation where the air handling units are not operating at optimal levels. Then another decision needs to be made if children can't be relocated to another space in order to make sure that we have filtered air to the highest degree possible.
And it's filtered air coming from the outside.
Coming from the
So
outside.
it's not recycled air, it's fresh
No,
air
it's
coming
coming
from
from
the
the
outside.
outside.
That's filtered of all allergens, and that's,
Correct.
okay. And then it always sounds like the best option is outside as much as possible. So can you, in more detail, talk about why lunch is just not happening outside?
Well, there's a quick answer, and then there's the not-so-quick answer. So the quick answer is that in many of our campuses, we are not in a space where recess and lunch can happen concurrently. Many of our schools are landlocked. So it has been communicated both by students, faculty and staff, and families the importance of outdoor education as well as recess, as well as socialization as a critical lever and a critical component. In schools where they have more flexibility because they have a larger degree of outdoor space, that will probably be an option. In schools where there is not that same flexibility, that will not be an option. As I prefaced at the beginning, every campus looks a little different. So making sure that we are maintaining social distancing to the greatest degree possible, that's our core focus, whether that happens indoor or outdoor. But there will be a concerted effort to make sure that children get outside as frequently as possible, weather permitting.
Break up the cycle here. I guess I have questions around the staff vaccinations and if you foresee any challenges with the mandated vaccines. Like, are we going to have staff bowing out? Have you heard of any staff members that are not willing to go through the mandated vaccination or testing process?
Not that we've heard. We have a very large percentage of staff that are fully vaccinated. Many of the staff who are currently not fully vaccinated, there are contributing medical reasons. None of it has to do with ideology. So we are going to be working closely with both of our education associations in order to strike the right balance about how we implement the executive order. We have a few weeks in order to strike that balance. But we're also going to continue to advocate the importance of vaccination within our community.
And I know a lot of districts are struggling with hiring in general. There's a teacher shortage. And I was trying to read the governor's guidance, and one of the things that immediately struck me was how this works with new hires. So if throughout the year we need to have a new hire, has there been any clarification on whether that person has to have a COVID vaccine passed before they start? Or how I couldn't find any guidance on it, and I was just wondering, because that creates gaps for our district if we need to wait 6 weeks before somebody can start, or whatever the case is for COVID vaccine.
So our understanding of the executive order is in that situation. So if you hired someone in the middle of the year and they were not fully vaccinated, they would be subject to weekly testing until they either have chosen to be fully vaccinated or continue with the testing as a mitigation strategy. But we've not gotten any guidance that says that there needs to be a delay in the onboarding of new staff.
And then my last question is, like, I know, like, it was 70% or whatever it was for students 12 and above. It was around the number.
Mhm.
Are we going to be continuing to make efforts? I mean, 70 is great, but it's still actually not
Right.
that great. Like, we
Right.
need to have more people vaccinated.
Right.
And I think there's like an onus on the community across the country and across the world, right, is like to get vaccinated. So are we going to have more vaccination events? Are we going to put out more information to get kids and adults vaccinated?
Absolutely. We're working very closely with borough leadership to think about continued pop-up clinics, continued student-focused events with a heavier emphasis on our children. Children are the best influencers of some of these actions. So we are thinking about what types of incentives or opportunities will children get excited about in order to move in that direction. But we are working very closely with the borough leaders, their pandemic recovery committee team, specifically around vaccinations. We will be hosting additional options in different locations. And I know that some of our education associations are also in the process of hosting this to show their commitment to this important task as well.
Hi, I have a few unrelated follow-up questions. You talked about random testing for children. Will there be parental forms to fill out to allow them to happen?
Yes.
Will
Yes.
Will the parents get notice ahead of time? Do you know?
In terms of
If you know, scheduling, like your child will be scheduled for a random test tomorrow. A notice going home?
Well, those are details we're still going to work out with the vendor. I'm not sure, but we will not be testing children without parent permission. I can guarantee that. In terms of what it looks like in strategy, we also want to be mindful of not disrupting the learning environment with testing, especially since we're talking about a sample size of roughly 10% on a weekly basis. So that will also be in partnership, not just with the vendor, but also schools, so that we can identify what's an appropriate time in order to do this that is not going to pull children out of class at the inappropriate time.
And I do understand all this is moving, all these are moving targets at this point, yeah, some of it. You've also mentioned lunch has changed a little bit with scheduling. Another big change that has happened at the middle school and high school campuses, you've gotten rid of block scheduling and you've instituted a homeroom. Can you just talk a little bit about why your administration has decided to do that?
So the middle and the high school teams worked on scheduling over the summer, and they made the recommendation that we needed to make a change. When we looked at the response of students during the hybrid environment, during remote instruction, what they identified was that durations of time, there was a lack of engagement, and that we had roughly 90% of our high school students operating in a fully virtual environment. And what they believed was, looking at the 21-22 school year as a transition year, it was appropriate to think about how do we increase consistency in an environment that has been inconsistent for the last 2 years among our students. How do we take into consideration the loss of academic stamina for our students? And then how do we also create a schedule that allows for social and emotional learning check-ins so that teachers and educational staff have an opportunity in order to touch base with students on a daily basis to make sure that they're okay. And then to make sure that if they need additional levels of support, we don't miss them. And they looked at the pros and cons of the previous schedule from 2019, and in some cases, students were only seeing their teachers 3 times a week, and they felt that every content area was important, and therefore seeing each content every single day made more sense.
There's a big concern in that certain demographic that they will have homework in all these subjects every day. Do you know if that's the case?
So at the secondary, so I'm a former, or I like to say recovering high school principal. When we think about homework, the philosophy around homework is to reinforce learning. It's not to bog children down with busy work. I tend, and maybe I'm naive, but I tend to rely heavier on the expertise of our educators to strike the right balance. We will be having professional learning communities where our educators are coming together and then identifying what are the most appropriate strategies for students. And in our initial discussions at the conclusion of last year, we did discuss homework, and we are going to strike the appropriate balance. Burdening children with homework doesn't translate to student achievement. So I know that our educators are going to be making those daily assessments and those decisions on a regular basis to really figure out what makes the most sense by content, by grade band, in the continuum of the year, with the understanding that many of our children have been out of practice. Many of our children have not been in the physical space. And the last thing that we want to do while rebuilding those relationships and reconnecting them to the learning process is to turn them off with busy work. So we're going to be balancing that on a regular basis.
Thanks. One more quick question. I'm not sure if it was brought up in this presentation, but I understand you talked about lunch, but I understand lunch is available to everyone this year.
That's correct.
And is there any forms the parents have to fill out for that?
Yes, we will still be, for federal reporting purposes, we will still be asking for families to fill out the lunch applications. This is helpful in terms of infrastructure needs, as well as our overall budget for nutritional services, not just for this year, but also for the future. So we will be asking for families to complete lunchroom applications, but we will be offering universal breakfast and lunch. For families that don't participate or don't receive the universal breakfast or lunch, and they want to pack their lunch, milk will be available to all students at no additional charge as well.
Okay, I have 3 questions. I'll start with the 2 easy ones first. Will the Start Strong, will that be given at the end of the year as well? Was it given twice a year? Is it beginning of the year?
No, so it's a diagnostic assessment to identify gaps from the previous year so that educators understand what gaps need to be filled during the current year.
Okay, so the following year will be given then? Am I getting ahead? Just ignore that question. We can move on. If a child needs a mask accommodation, like if they have an IEP, 504, medical, how should a parent go about requesting that?
I would contact their case manager.
Case manager? Okay.
And if the case manager is unavailable, reach out to the school nurse. That's a collaborative process between the family and the educators on campus.
Okay, and this is the last question. What is or are the plans, procedures in place if a student or class needs to quarantine? This is likely going to look different, I'm sure, different grades, different campuses, I understand that, but is there a procedure that we're looking at?
So yes, there is a procedure. So one of the things that we're currently working through is making sure that we take what we learned from last year in terms of maintaining our Google Classrooms on a weekly basis in the event that something like that takes place. So for the intermittent student that is out due to sickness or whatever the case may be, they will still have the Google Classroom that's available where they can maintain what the class is doing. In situations where a whole class needs to quarantine, provided that the educator is not sick or showing symptoms, that whole class would convert to a virtual class during the exclusion period. In the event that the educator is unable to perform that duty, a substitute would be placed within that space for the whole class. In situations where there are 1 or 2 children or a small group of children and not the whole class, the district is currently working on a process of bringing in part-time educators that would take all of those individual students from across the campus and provide by grade band targeted instruction during their exclusion period. So we will be presenting more of that in the future, but we're currently planning for contingencies around that.
I do have a number of questions, starting with just lunch. Can you clarify with the Tatum lunch, you mentioned there would be 45 inside and 45 outside during a given lunch period? Did I hear that incorrectly? So those 45, would there be half taking lunch inside and half taking lunch outside, or? It's
No, half would be inside eating their lunch, the other half would be outside for recess
And
and socialization.
and then swap, okay.
And then they
Awesome.
switch.
And then for lunch, are we relying on volunteers for lunch to make sure we can, I guess, oversee all the kids during all the lunch periods?
So we're not relying on volunteers. We are working through our PTAs to increase the level of supervision on campus. Above and beyond our educators, some of our educators will be providing supervision on some campuses. We have lunchroom aides at other campuses. We have recess monitors on some campuses. So every campus is going to look a little bit differently. But yes, we highly value, respect, and appreciate our PTAs for providing that additional layer of support.
Do you know if that's going well? Just have a chance to, I guess, plug, help out your school if you have a chance to help out with lunch, I guess.
So my gratuitous plug is to join your local PTA. The PTAs on every campus are phenomenal. They have really helped us to mitigate some of the challenges associated with the pandemic. So I would reach out to the PTAs, join the PTAs, and if you are interested in volunteering, they will show you how to connect with your child's school.
Awesome. Some other follow-up questions. Should parents expect the same level of, I guess, communication when it comes to potential exposure for the kids that they did in the previous years? If there are like those test positive cases?
So yes, whenever there is a confirmed case, we will continue to provide the notification to the community, but the contact tracing is a more personal approach with affected individuals who may or may not need to quarantine or also be tested.
And you've been talking about how about 10% of the student body will be tested randomly, I guess, per week.
Yes.
Are teachers also going to be subject to the random testing?
So we are trying to strike the appropriate balance. We will be working in partnership with our association leaders in order to figure out what that looks like. In some of our cases, because we have the overwhelming majority of our educators fully vaccinated, that presents an additional positive. So for the faculty and staff who will need to be tested weekly per executive order, there will be some bleed over that we don't want to happen. So we're going to be working with them in order to strike the appropriate balance.
Now, I think you mentioned it earlier, but that percent vaccinated for our staff, do you know what that is?
It's roughly 80%.
And that includes teachers and staff?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. And I have a question about extracurriculars. Are they affected or how have they changed this year compared to maybe previous years before the pandemic?
Well, we fully encourage schools to provide extracurricular opportunities. It'll look different on every campus based on what is driven by student demand and academic need, but there will be resources made available for extracurricular activities.
Awesome, thank you.
I have a question to follow up with Rogers and Matt's question about the 10%. You asked one of them, which is the teacher thing, and I understand that. So are you saying that if a teacher and or student is vaccinated, they won't be part of the pooling process, sampling process?
No, we're not saying that. We are trying to work out the logistics between our associations and between the vendor in order to work through what does that look like on every campus.
Right, so you're working with two different entities, and I understand that for each category of population.
Right.
But I thought I heard something about vaccinated teachers and positivity rates or something, so I just wanted to clarify that.
No, his question was how many staff are fully vaccinated, and I said that there was 80%.
Okay.
And what I shared is that because we have such a high vaccination rate among our staff, there are staff who, per the executive order, have to be tested every week.
Right.
So they would not fall under that 10% of random. So those particular individuals will need to be tested weekly.
I get that.
So we didn't necessarily want the bleed over between that. So we're trying to work through the logistics of what the testing strategy will look like from campus to campus.
Yeah, so technically speaking, we'll have way more than 10% tested because we already have
Yes.
a default testing happening with some of the teachers. Thank you.
So I wanted to jump back in for a second. I wanted to ask about A clarification about what I heard with some of the accommodations, that if the kids are inside for PE and running around, they would be able to take their masks off, or just for kids that they have like a 504 accommodation for?
So it depends on the physical activity that the students are participating in. So our health educators are going to strike the right balance based on their class sizes, based on the age and the grade band. But it is recommended that when students are participating in activities where there is a high degree of physical exertion, that the mask should come off. So that is one of the pieces of guidance that we are adhering to. Our physical educators are going to be identifying which activities are most appropriate given where we are within the continuum of the virus.
Okay.
But we want to make sure that we're being clear and transparent about what the guidance demands, to make sure that families don't have reservations or concerns about, if my child is, doing wind sprints, they're not going to be doing that with in a masked environment where there's already a reduction of oxygen based on the physical activity. So that was the reason for that, just sharing the full gamut of the guidance.
But if the student felt more comfortable leaving their mask on, that would be
their choice.
totally allowed as well.
Yes.
And I'm glad that singing is coming back for the elementary school. Will there be singing masks for the elementary school the way it is for middle school and high school?
I'll have to get back to you on that. I know that there were different types of masks for the older children. I am not sure the type of mask or structures for the younger children.
Little kids, yeah. And then just last, because I know that lunch is the toughest thing, and so you kind of explained why outside is, a permanent outside is a tougher thing, but maybe could you go into even more detail about why, when everyone is very anxious about lunch, that the answer is not, let's just take them all outside to the street or outside to, to tents that we can put up. Like, why is that realistically not as feasible as we would all like it to be?
But one of the issues is that Mother Nature is often inconvenient. We had tents outside at Newby. We had a really powerful windstorm, and we no longer have tents at Newby. The storm destroyed them. Putting children in the streets, that is also equally not an option that we would be looking to consider at this time, based on the lack of bandwidth to set up and tear down on a daily basis, in addition to the tremendous imposition that it would put on residents by blocking off streets. Some of our schools have the ability, but not necessarily the supervision, for children to eat outside in a controlled environment. So when weighing all of those, schools are going to continually evaluate their ability to do that. But also there's an additional caveat, and that's really based on inclement weather. If it's too hot, children are not supposed to be outside. If it's too cold, they're not supposed to be outside. If there's thunder and lightning, they're not supposed to be outside. And as a core strategy, there's too many unknown variables, and we can't lean heavily on that as our sole strategy. So we're going to be looking at multiple ways in order to provide lunch to our students.
And would it be fair to say that, since we've said a million times here that everything is subject to change and flexibility, that if we find that the setup that is currently in place isn't working because kids are getting sick or it's feeling too crowded, that things are going to be put into place to figure out something else? That we're not just going to say, well, that's the way it goes, and some kids are going to get sick, sort of thing.
No, there's routine monitoring. We'll be looking at this on predominantly a weekly basis, and tweaks that need to be made along the way. Major reconstructive change will probably not occur until the end of the marking period, but weekly adjustments are very realistic for us to implement. Making sure that we are communicating effectively with our families so that they understand not just what we're doing, but why we're doing it. But that'll be an ongoing conversation throughout the year.
That just led me to another question. So am I also to assume that the weekly update that we all got used to in the pandemic will continue?
No.
Okay, then how are you going to communicate with us?
It will change.
Okay.
So instead of it being a weekly update, It will be a celebration of student learning. What we want to really focus on is we're not going to ignore the pandemic, but we're not going to run away and let it dictate to us either. We are going to focus on celebrating student learning, celebrating effective educator practice, celebrating student engagement and achievement, while striking a right balance in terms of public health information and ongoing operations. But we will be placing a greater emphasis on positivity and celebration of our students.
So the public health information or any changes will be more on an as-needed basis, those
Yes.
updates? Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions from board members on this topic? All right. So with that, can I get a motion to exit committee of the whole?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I am to assume that that was the presentation, right, for section 4? Okay, just thought so, but I didn't want to cut someone off. So then we're going to move to section 5 on the agenda, future dates and miscellaneous information. I just wanted to highlight for everyone that obviously September 8th is the first day of school for students, and that those first 3 days are single session days to kind of reorient everyone. And then that September 22nd and September 29th are the virtual back-to-school nights. So to mark those on your calendar as needed. Section 6 is routine board business. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the June 21st regular board meeting and the July 15th, 2021 special board meeting?
So moved.
And you're beating me to it. Clinton was the second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we have arrived at section 7, which is our first opportunity for public comment. I have to reorient the way I say it because now we're in person again, so you can actually please stand, state your name and address, and keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. The purpose for this public comment session is to discuss items listed on the agenda. Additional, more general comments may be made later in the meeting. The public is reminded that attempts to resolve all concerns and complaints should first go through appropriate staff members and administrators. The intent of public comment is to give the community the opportunity to provide feedback to the board. We will be actively listening and taking notes so that we can take all that is being said into consideration. If appropriate, clarifying communications will go out later in the week. And for more general concerns, they may be discussed by the board during future committee meetings. So with all of that being said, if anyone in the audience would like to stand and give a public comment, please do so now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Kavanaugh. I live at 251 Crestmont Terrace. Thank you for this information. I still have questions about the Tatum lunch policy. I've been in correspondence with the principal and understand that we have 88 kids eating in the lunchroom 3 feet apart. I'm uncomfortable with this plan. Both of my kids are at this school unvaccinated, and my concern is that why aren't we doing more outside? I've asked, and it just sounds like, you know, we have recess, but it sounds like other school districts are doing this. So I remain concerned why we are not. 88 kids unmasked does not seem like a good approach. And also, when I've asked about what's the plan across the elementary schools, I haven't been provided with the information because we talk about equity, but are some of our elementary school students being provided with greater safety simply because they were randomly assigned to one school? I have concerns about this. Look at the parent volunteer list. Zane has 7 times more volunteers, so how are we allocating resources to supplement the schools that might not have as many parental resources to assist with lunches? And if we've received funding, what resources are being allocated to the schools that have fewer or greater needs, Tatum being the one? 2 grades per class, 2 classes per grade, and obviously tighter quarters because of that. So I would like greater clarity on these. It's my understanding that both Voorhees and Merchantville are doing outdoor lunches, so perhaps we could, I'd be curious what challenges they've overcome and how we might do the same.
Thank you. You can go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Jill Tribulus. I live at 367 Park Avenue. I also run the law office of Jill Tribulus on Hannon Avenue, next to Penguin Cleaners. So this year, if you could all vote for my Christmas decorations, I would greatly appreciate it, because I really do want to win. I sent the board an email this morning. I trust everyone received that. And was everybody able to review? Okay, and just in the event that the audience, I just want to highlight parts of that email just for the audience. As an attorney, I rely heavily on expert testimony and expert witnesses. And this morning, I sent the board an email introducing to them a man named Stephen Petty, who is an industrial hygienist. In a nutshell, industrial hygienists are experts in everything PPE. Stephen Petty tells doctors like Anthony Fauci what PPE to use in any given situation and the proper way to use that PPE. Stephen Petty is one of the top experts on emergency exposure PPE in the country. He has provided expert testimony in more than 400 trials, and he is serving as a Roundup exposure expert. He has at least 9 patents. He has written several textbooks. His resume is 14 pages long, single-spaced. Based on podcasts that Stephen Petty recently published, we learned the following. Masks do not stop the transmission of COVID particles. A COVID particle is 1,000 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair follicle. So just looking at the board members now and the masks, I see gaps by the nose, by the ears, definitely large enough for a piece of hair to go through, and thousands of possible COVID particles. Masks are not considered PPE. Social distancing does not work. There are alternate methods available to prevent or reduce transmission, and they are ventilation, dilution, and destruction. And I was happy to hear the superintendent say 2 things today. We're happy to hear several things, but these are the 2 that stood out. When you were talking about masks, you mentioned that changes could happen in that area, and you also said that you're going to follow the science. And I certainly hope that you do follow the science, because I provided that to you this morning. I'd never heard of Stephen Petty until last week. And again, as an attorney, when you find an expert who is this good, you get really excited. And I got very excited about this man, because up until now, you heard expert testimony, one medical doctor saying masks work, another medical doctor saying masks don't work. Stephen Petty walks in, and if experts were caviar, he would be beluga. He is the #1. He is above reproach. I checked him out. He doesn't have any political, financial, or social motivation. He is an extremely smart man, and he sees that we are being given incorrect information, and he started doing podcasts 3 weeks ago to make sure that everyone knew the right information. And if you look at other podcasts that he does, he dissects documents from the CDC, OSHA, FDA, some of the governmental bodies that were mentioned tonight. And at the beginning of these documents, they say one thing, but in the middle or at the end, when you're pretty certain that the normal person stopped reading, they say something else. They contradict themselves. You need to listen to this man. It's Petty Podcasts. Look him up. I've been suspicious about the effectiveness of masks since the very beginning. I think anybody who has a pulse has wondered, wow, and I'm a communications major, and I know that a virus particle is very, very tiny, and it's going to get through any gap in a mask. So when I heard what he was telling me, it made sense. I know that he is speaking truth. And again, he has no motivation to do anything but to tell the truth. So now, board, that you have the following information, now that you have the truth, I want to know what you're going to do about it. You have an obligation to do what's best for our children, and if there's an alternate solution that we need to explore, something that's better than masks ever would be, even if they worked the way they say they do, we need to do it. And if you don't do anything, then you don't deserve to fill the seat that you're actually sitting in right now. You're the first governmental body that I'm presenting this information to, and I don't believe you're going to be the last. There's lawsuits filed every day in relation to mask mandates, and I think it's only a matter of time that a lawsuit is going to be filed. I want to fight with you. There is strength in numbers. I know you guys want to do what's in the best interest of the children. Keep an open mind. Look at these experts. Look at what they're telling you and fight with me. I do not want to fight against you. Our children need to be heard. We need to be their voices. Our children need heroes. And I guess the question is, am I looking at heroes right now? I certainly hope that answer is yes. Thank you.
Well, my name is Dr. Michael Wolf. I live at 436 West Collins Avenue. I'm a board-certified general pediatrician. I specialize in urgent care and sports medicine. My daughter is a rising second grader. Before I get into, I guess, a longer comment, my first comment is just would be curious what approaches the individual schools are taking on helping kids, especially younger kids, reintroducing themselves into the classroom. I appreciate the fact that the program was in place over the summer. My daughter specifically is concerned about going into her classroom, and that school was not in her class as her school, like many of the programs. And she has, did 6 months of kindergarten and then hasn't been in school in a year and a half. And so just wondering what the school board has thought about, and the school district has thought about sort of reintroduction programs for just first day of school stuff, like where do I show up, how do I meet my teacher, things like that. Second of all, I personally have tested over 3,000 children for COVID. I spoke on the phone today with directors of several urgent cares who have tested 20,000 kids over the last 18 months. The consensus pre-Delta, now Delta is a game changer, and it's unclear, we don't have the information yet, is that masks are overwhelmingly effective at preventing the spread of COVID. The virus is very, very tiny. The virus does not have wings and fly. The virus goes on droplets. And if you were interested in sitting in front of me and having me spit in your face with my mask on, or spitting in your face with the mask off, it's very clear that the mask is effective at preventing droplets from transmitting, and that's how the virus is transmitted. So I would urge the board to take as much opportunity as possible to do as much activities with mask on as possible, and any activities where masks should be removed or need to be removed should be outside as much as possible. This is the overwhelming consensus of the medical community. Medical decision-making is not based upon expert opinion like lawyers make their decisions based upon. And as any lawyer that does any trial knows, you can, in every single trial, you can find an expert that will say the exact opposite of what the first one said. And the medical opinion is based upon study after study after study that, while certainly not perfect, probably, and this is unfortunately is a little bit underchanged with Delta, probably masks at this point are more effective in preventing spread than vaccinations are. That's a little unclear because we haven't had the mass schooling come together in the situation of Delta, but study after study has shown, and the general consensus of the medical community is that masking is our best option to prevent spread.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kate Nicely. I have a middle school student and a Tatum student, and I'm adding my voice to the list of parents concerned about lunches. I would like to see it outside if at all possible. Thank you for keeping the mask mandate. I think it's really important. And I'm happy to volunteer in any way. I'll be sure to let my PTA know that I want to help out with lunches if I can. I'm just imagining, like, some of my choices. My unvaccinated daughter hasn't been in a restaurant. She hasn't had an inside play date this entire time. So to feel like then I'm sending her to school in a room with 45 unmasked kids doesn't feel good.
Hi everyone, I'm Maggie Cernick. I'm at 514 Park Avenue, and I have a rising sixth grader. And first and foremost, I just want to thank you all for your attention. I know these are really difficult times, and you all obviously put a lot of thought and effort into this, so thank you. I was very heartened to hear that the middle school especially is looking at alternative arrangements for lunch, because as a parent of a child who's not yet able to be vaccinated, the initial proposal of having 160 to 180 unvaccinated sixth graders in a basement cafeteria was very unsettling to me. So I really appreciate hearing both from Dr. McMullen as well as you all that other various spaces are being considered for that. I would be really interested to hear sort of more specifics about the hows and the whens and the whys and the wheres. So which children will be going where? How do they know? You mentioned assigned seats in other schools. I don't know if that's something. Of course, I was heartened to hear that outdoor spaces are being considered. As you know, that's something that is kind of near and dear to my heart. So I'm very glad to hear that. But any really sort of more specific guidance about what we can sort of anticipate both as parents and for our children about where they might be dining and with whom, and sort of like what the actual distancing will look like, especially given, I know Mr. Higginbotham has done an amazing job looking at all the different ceiling heights and ventilation and things like that. But really, how does that sort of come into play when we're making determinations about, you know, the distance that will be able to be achieved between students? That would be really wonderful information. Also, I would be really interested to hear more about the hydroxyl generators. Simply because I had to Google that, and they look like they're UV generators. So I was just wondering, like, where are they going to be? And I trust that the health and safety has been completely worked over, but if I could just have more information, I'd be interested to hear that as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Lauren Robbins, 114 Washington Avenue. I have a 7th grader at the middle school and a 4th grader at Tatum. Echoing many of the comments, lunch is the biggest concern in our household, given the not being able to wear masks. The outdoor options, I can appreciate the logistical challenges with getting kids indoors and outdoors at lunchtime. And, you know, I'm a full-time employed working professional, and I would add my name to the list of if there's any way that it's manpower being, you know, the issue, that please, like, you mentioned the PTAs, like, please reach out to families, because I think, you know, a lot of us would feel comfortable getting kids outdoors as much as possible, when and where possible. So again, thanks for all your efforts, and just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brooke DeRue. I live on 208 Reading Avenue, Oakland, New Jersey. I just wanted to come up and say that I took a look at your proposal for how school's supposed to start. It's a joke. You're creating a prison for our children. How can they be happy being in school with wearing a mask after the whole summer of not having to wear one and being with their friends? Now you're going to be isolating them. You're going to be telling them that they can't do this, they can't do that. Kids are not spreaders of COVID. If they do get COVID, they don't get as sick. And out of all the people, there's no child that has died from COVID. And if you do end up looking that up, and it says that there has been children that have died from it, they've had pre-existing conditions of something else. I'm just asking the school board if they would please consider giving us parents a voice to whether or not to have masks on our children or not. I was in the high school today, and I unregistered my child, Zachary DeRue, from school. I am going to homeschool him because I'm so fed up with how the school has been doing. I'm not going to have him sit in a classroom with a mask on for no reason whatsoever. I have another son who's autistic. He's in the special needs program. and he has epilepsy. I sent in a note to his case manager, and I was denied by your doctor, saying that he has to wear it. He has not had a seizure all summer, not being in school, and now I'm supposed to put him in school with a mask on? I've talked to his teacher. They say we're going to have a couple mask break times. That's not going to be enough. So the first time that my son has a seizure because he had to wear a mask at school, I'm taking him out. I'm not going to risk my child's health because stuff is going on. Your experts of CDC, WHO, and of all the other alphabets have got ulterior motives, and they're all connected to one another. They're all giving tit for tat for money. The CDC, as their biggest funder, is Pfizer. So the doctors, they say, okay, get vaccination, and then Pfizer gives them money, and the CDC and the doctors of American Academy of Pediatrics to get that. You have the NEA, the New Jersey Teachers Association. The only reason why our children are masked is because the NEA has specifically said, well, actually, they specifically gave Governor Murphy money for his reelection plan, and so he, instead of letting the different schools decide for themselves, he decided to pay them back by saying, okay, then masks are going to be at school. I really wish that you would follow the science. When you go to a doctor and they tell you something, and you have the right to be able to have a second opinion. We have not been able to have a second opinion because they've been censored. You can't find them. You have to go on the dark web to find people. And they'll tell you. They're actually experts, and they're actually saying what's going on. So instead of follow the science, instead of the political science of the political party. Thank you.
Not seeing anyone else standing up. Dr. McDowell, I just wanted to take a minute to say, I think it would be, it sounds like it would be really helpful if schools could send a more specific, school-specific information about what lunches will look like for their schools and what the reintroduction of, I'm sure that something about the first day of school will be coming out anyway, but something more specific about what to expect at lunch sounds like it would be very useful.
Okay, yes.
Moving on to section 8, the superintendent's report. Dr. McDowell.
Apologies, I'm not used to looking at it on paper. I'm used to looking at it on a big screen.
This is Dr. McDowell's first in-person meeting.
So thank you again for your patience and grace. Our enrollment report is attached. June of 2020, we had an enrollment of 2234. As of June 2021, enrollment of 2211. The school safety drill report for June 2020 is also presented. There are no suspensions for 8.03 and no reports for 8.04 in terms of anti-bullying.
Thank you. Moving on to section 9, the business administrator board secretary report. Ms. Coleman, could you take that away, please?
Thank you. So this evening, I'm looking for approval for your June and July monthly transfers. as well as your June and July secretary and treasurer cash reports, your June student activities report, your food service financial statements for the months of June and July, a listing of the purchase orders issued in the months of July and August, and then a listing of the warrants for July and August. And just a note, your audit has been completed, and hopefully I'll have something to provide to you. It's due to the state by December, but depending on when Trent gets the pension numbers back. But your audit has been completed as well this summer.
Thank you. Moving on to Section 10, the Buildings, Grounds, and Finance Committee. Mr. Craig, can you present for us?
Thank you. The Finance, Buildings, and Grounds Committee reviews all financial statements, purchase orders, and warrants on a monthly basis. The committee also reviews and approves all contracts with outside service providers and oversees all maintenance and capital improvement projects district-wide. Starting off, 10.2 to 10.9 is the approval of Ms. Coleman's report. Starting then 10.10 is approving of a 10% transfer between budgetary lines for the district reorganization. We did submit a request to the county office, and this is in support of the administrative reorganization that Dr. McDowell proposed. 10.11 and 10.12 are related to the ESEA grant and formula, which we are eligible to apply for. Title 1A, Title 2A, Title 4, total of over $403,518. And then those salaries are attached to salaries are then attached in 12 for that grant. A portion of all these are going to the 3 individuals that are covered by the grant. Either a portion of their salary or their full salary being covered by the grant. 10.13 is preschool program contract for the year. We had initially proposed and got approval for this. DOE had changed the per pupil, so this is needed to be reapproved. 10.14 is agreement on transportation with River Edge School District for a student to Essex Valley School from a group home for the 2021-2022 school year. 10.15 is the preschool toilet waiver for classrooms where a toilet is not located in the classroom. This outlines to the New Jersey Department of Education how far students will have to travel, ranging from as little as 3 feet to one instance where it is 100 feet. 10.16 is contract for transportation services as needed. Pull up here. Translation services as needed basis according to the attached rates for the 2021-2022 school year. This is for if there's languages that come up for parents or students that we don't readily have someone who speaks. This organization will provide those services for us at the approved rate. 10.18, the ad hoc committee interviewed attorney Adam Herman this week and recommended retaining his firm's services for this real estate project. So that is approval of bringing his firm in.
Matt, you missed 10.17.
Did I? I'm sorry. 10.17 is the shared maintenance service agreement with the Haddon Heights Board of Education. If you remember, at the beginning of the summer, we approved a bunch of these types of shared services agreements to help keep costs low. We're working with Haddon Heights here and providing expertise around grounds maintenance, some plumbing, electricians, different rates, but working with them and helping, providing some extra support to them from our grounds crew and helping, again, to keep cost rate and keep costs low for some of these projects. So it was 18, so 19 is approval of the standard operating procedures. As this is for the business office manual and internal controls that Ms. Coleman has put together. So approval of that. 10.20 is textbook disposal at Mark Newby School. These are books that were purchased with tax dollars and we have to approve for discarding them. These are all, there's only about 4 books. They're all from the early 90s. And I believe my favorite was Assertive Discipline for Parents, circa 1988. And then lastly, 10.21, 2 student activity voided checks. These have not been cashed by the students, they're a couple years old, so we have to void them before we recut. I believe you said these were scholarships? So we're going to reach out to the students and find out why, and hopefully help them with cashing those checks and getting access to the funds that they had earned. So with that, I am seeking approval for 10.01 to 10.21.
Do I have a motion to approve those items?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Questions or comments from board members?
Yeah, Reagan, here I do have a question, or maybe more of a comment, but 10.18 appeared on the agenda this morning with no attached information to it, just simply a note to approve this. We're being asked to approve 2 attorneys who we don't know for an open-ended contract for a project that hasn't been approved by the board. Certainly doesn't seem to be as clear as it could be for presentation to the board members, nor does it seem to be the best way to spend money. So I'm vehemently is probably a good word, opposed to it at this point.
Understood. I do know that it was made clear to board members that the ad hoc committee was interviewing these individuals and would be recommending one. So to say that no one knows anything about these people would not be accurate, that members of the board have interviewed the people, and that I hear what you're saying about the information not being on the board agenda, but I did email everyone this afternoon when that was made clear to me to make sure that everyone did have their profile and the notes from the ad hoc committee about what they thought about it. But I hear what you're saying about the information not being as available as you wish it would have been.
Well, not as available, just non-existent. The one person that we knew was going to be interviewed was the person who never showed up for the interview, apparently. And the person that was interviewed, we had no knowledge of who this person was. The board didn't know anything about these people until they showed up on the agenda this morning to approve this individual. The only thing I did see with him after the fact was a bio that he had prepared. It comes from, apparently from his firm. No copy of the proposal that he put forward, no anything. On the plus side, his rate of $175 an hour is, it's a good rate for an attorney. But I'd like to know a little bit more about the attorney before we spend the money.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
I just want to confirm and also clarify, I think, more so, that we did vote to move forward with hiring this attorney last meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor.
Yes?
Mr. Chu.
Yes.
Mr. Craig.
Yes.
Ms. Henry.
Yes.
Ms. Mello. Ms. Rivera.
Yes?
Mrs. Savarino.
Yes.
Mrs. Sheridan Celia.
Yes.
Mr. Stotts.
Yes, except item 10.18 where I vote no.
Mrs. Caden.
Yes. Next, we have section 11, the curriculum committee. Ms. Savarino, can you present, please?
The curriculum committee oversees and approves the district curriculum and assessment programs, as well as field trips, home instruction, co-curricular programs, and the school calendar. So starting off with 1102 and 1103, which are elementary and middle school field trips, there are none currently. 1104, there is one high school field trip, the high school marching band, on the 25th of September. 1105 as the approval for the middle school musical, Honk Junior, and that is tentatively scheduled for December 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, so fingers crossed that is able to occur. 11.06, Camden County College Transition to College Program. I actually have a question about how I'm supposed to present this, because are we just reapproving the contract that is existing? Because the contract turns over every year, is that correct? I don't know if I'm allowed to ask you, but I just want to say it the right way.
Yes, we did, and I think last year may have been the first year, may have been the second year, but we do have a child in attendance there right now. There is one.
Right, so we're just approving the contract then? That's what this
Yes.
is? Okay, got it. So I will start over with that. 11.06, the Camden County College Transition to College Program, the approval of the contract with that. And then 11.07, there are 3 courses for the high school district curriculum. In the technical education computer science area, there is digital production and engineering 2, design tech 3. Is that a 3? 3? Yeah, God, I need glasses. And then in social studies, African American studies. And I believe, sorry. And then 11.08, the 21-22 Collingswood calendar supplement is up for approval. So I need approval for 11.04 to 11.08.
Do I have a motion to approve these items?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Questions or comments from board members?
I have a question about 11.06, the Camden County College Transition to College Program. Just knowing that there is still a comment that revision is needed on that contract. I guess what's the process there?
Sorry.
I can't do it. I did reach out to them about, clarifying that. It is their standard form contract, so I know it's been bounced around at Camden County College, so I haven't got a reply yet from them about revising. I don't even know if we're able to revise the contract because it's very similar to the one that was executed previously. So.
And to ask a clarifying question about that one. So, but we have this exact contract with that exact language happened last year, and we were charged the amount and not more or any, nothing?
No, they actually have to send us, usually when we do tuition, we see enrollment. You usually send a bill with the enrollment of the child before we pay.
Okay. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, so if we approve this now, we're approving moving forward with the language as it is now?
It's 10,000, it's not like 20,000, it's 10,000 per child.
Okay.
Period.
Okay.
That helps us, because I remember our concern was something about the language being written that it might be that we would be charged for that child for 4 years, but if we are approving it year by year, and we're waiting for the contract language to possibly change for the next year, would that cover us from potentially being?
Yeah, I did tell them that
Right.
section was kind of ambiguous with
Right.
future.
The wording was just a
Future
little
terms.
strange.
It's being bounced around around the college, because I'm guessing we're not the only district that got the contract.
Right.
So right now, we're on the hook for one child for $10,000.
And if we don't approve this, or what happens to that child then?
They would attend, I just don't pay the bill until the child's already there, they were there last year. So,
Okay.
That's what I'm saying, we already had somebody there.
Okay.
Oop,
Just on that, the paperwork here says 3 years. It says 21 to 24, not 1 year. So it looks like if we agree to this, we've agreed to the contract for 3 years. At 10 grand a year, but it does look like a 3-year contract from what the information we have here is.
That's correct.
Okay, so we're approving a 3-year contract.
Yes. Well,
Okay,
don't
yeah,
do this to
that
me,
doesn't seem-
yes.
Okay.
The issue is it's for children that are not successful in the high school setting, so they're completing their high school years, and then they're attaining college credit.
Yeah.
So for me to pay the bill, they have to show evidence that the kid is enrolled and continuously enrolled in attending classes, which
And I have
they
no
do
problem with
before
that.
I pay
No,
any
I
bill.
think it's a good program, but I just wanted to point out, the question came up, is this 1-year contract? And the answer is no, it's not a 1-year contract. It's a 3-year contract.
Correct, but I pay the $10,000 annually, and
Correct.
I did ask for them for a revision of the contract. If they do not revise the contract, then we have a child that does not have a placement.
Yeah,
So-
no, as I say, I'm in favor of the program. I think it's a good program. I just want to clarify that it's not a one-year contract, it's a 3-year contract.
Duly noted.
Payable annually.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can we table it until we figure this out? Especially if you're waiting for clarifying language from the person you're already into a contract with. Can we just,
That's up to the board.
When would we be invoiced for this child?
I don't know, I haven't received anything yet.
Okay. Yeah, I'm asking just because if tabling it for a month is okay in terms of invoicing and payment, then I would be in favor of that. And if not, to get a revision from the county college, at least to get a opinion from our lawyer.
It's up to the board. I'll let you know when I hear back from Camden County College. I got the notes from your committees last week, and I did send it off to Camden County College, and I asked their bursar or whoever handles what are on their department, and I said if they weren't the right people to send it to someone, and I haven't heard back, so I'm certain that we will, but just not yet.
Do we need a motion to table that? So I move
Yes.
that we table item 1106 until the next board meeting.
Second.
So then now we are looking for, we're going to do this again. We're looking for approval of items 11.02 to 11.05, and then 11.07 to 11.08. I'm sorry. Roll call for the motion. Is it a roll call or an all in favor?
I'll do a roll. I'm just catching up with my notes here.
Thank you, Bill.
2 seconds, please. Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Henry?
No.
Ms. Mello?
Yes?
Ms. Rivera?
Yes.
Mrs. Severino?
No.
Ms. Sheridan Celia?
yes?
Mr. Stotts?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaden?
Yes. So now we need approval of items 11.02 to 11.04, 05, excuse me, and then 11.07 to 11.08. Do I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
Questions or comments from the board? Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Henry?
Yes.
Ms. Mello?
Yes.
Ms. Rivera?
Yes.
Mrs. Severino?
Yes.
Sheridan Celia?
Yes?
Mr. Stotts?
Yes.
And Mrs. Kaden?
Yes. Moving on to section 12, the Personnel Committee, Ms. Sheridan Celia. Please present the very long agenda.
Yes. The Personnel Committee reviews all recommendations for teaching and staff employment, considers co-curricular employment, and considers all professional development opportunities for staff members. Items 12.02 and 12.03 are retirements of Mr. Prince, who's in the Buildings and Grounds Committee, Buildings and Grounds Department, and Mrs. Weedman, who is an instructional assistant. There are 2 rescinded contracts at 12.04 and 12.05. 12.06 through 12.14 are resignations. 12.15 and 12.16 are transfers. 12.17 through 12.30 are teachers and staff hirings. There is a revised contracts at 12.31 and 12.32 of the agenda. At 12.33, asking for approval of course overloads for 3 of our high school teachers. three of our teachers, I believe they're all in the high school. 12.34 through 12.36 are approval of permanent building substitutions for the various schools. 12.37 and through 12.39 are athletic stipends, non-athletic stipends, middle school stipends, and high school stipends. And 12.40 is the middle school athletic EDP stipends. Agenda item 12.41 is a listing of athletic event personnel. 12.42, summer athletic physicals. 12.43, move to recommend certain band volunteers. 12.44, elementary certified lunch teacher approval. 12.45, elementary lunchtime and playground assistance. 12.46 are various, this is for the lunch program. This isn't inclusive yet because I don't believe we have all the different schools' volunteer lists in, but this is to approve a lunch volunteers for the various elementary schools. 12.47 is after-school mental health support staff. 12.48, a listing of the student practicum teacher placements for the year, as well as at 12.49. 12.50, the summer child study team approvals. At 51, summer SEL extension program. 12.52 is also a summer SEL extension program of nurses. 12.53 is approval of summer academy staff, as well as at 12.54. 12.56, the summer marching band staff. 12.57, summer high school curriculum development. 12.58, a listing of AED training employees who were trained. 12.59, a listing of substitutes and tutors. 12.60 is approval of a travel expense form. At item 12.61, approval of recognition of retirees, Ms. Casey and Mr. Steinhagen. So we're at 12.65, and we're seeking approval, I fast-tracked it, of a 12.02 through 12.63.
All right, do we have a motion to approve all of those items?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Questions or comments from board members?
Yes, I have a question. Are coaches who may not be regular staff members subject to the same vaccination and testing? And what about our volunteers? Thank you.
I just had a question. It's more just a curiosity thing. I see that both the head coach and assistant coach for middle school, they're both vacant. What happens to a club sport or activity if there's no coaching or staff to run it? It's 12.4 middle school, boys soccer, head coach open, assistant coach open.
We get very creative with having guest coaches come in. Generally, what ends up happening is that the athletic department will find a way to make sure that it is covered until a permanent placement can be made, but we're not going to leave the children hanging.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I did want to make a comment about 12.46, the elementary lunch volunteers, and just the thought of if it's viable or feasible for us to think of volunteers across the district rather than at the school level, especially if some schools may need more volunteers or fewer volunteers than other schools, and depending on the availability of different parents in different areas of the town. I think if that's at all feasible through the PTA structure or whatever structure we have, I think that might be a great way to make sure that all of our elementary schools have the personnel needed to run lunch.
Mine was also on, with the same thing, with the schools that do not have volunteers submitted yet, will they be able to, are we able to retroactively approve volunteers so they can actually start the school year out, or do they have to wait until the next board meeting?
We can get them started after the September meeting. But this was the list. I think we were adding Zane people as of today, trying to get everybody on. We just haven't heard from all the schools yet.
Do you not need to have certain clearances to volunteer?
Volunteers will need to be fingerprinted.
Right,
So
so
there's
there's turnaround
so
time
some
for
that
that.
haven't been yet, then they will be reimbursed, obviously, by the board. Some may already be fingerprinted because they already work with the PTA and volunteer bases. So we gave all that information out to the principals so they could disseminate it to PTAs.
I'm more so asking because if people want to volunteer now, it may take a couple weeks to get that back before they can come on site, right?
Correct.
Any other questions or comments from board members? I forgot where we were. Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Henry?
Yes.
Ms. Mello?
I think that's the second name you've called me. Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, I did call you. Ms. Rivera?
Yes.
Mrs. Severino?
Yes.
Ms. Sheridan Celia?
Yes.
Mr. Stotts?
Yes, except those items marked with the double asterisk where I abstain.
Mrs. Caden?
Yes, except item 12.46 where I abstain, not because I don't support it, but because I'm on the list.
Thanks.
Now we're moving to section 13, the policy committee. Mr. Connor?
Thank you. The Policy and Regulations Committee reviews all updates and changes of district policy and regulations. The following are for first reading. Deep breath. 131, bylaws, policies, and regulations. This is a revision. 1643, family leave is a new policy. 1648.11, the road forward COVID-19 health and safety is a new policy. 2421, career and technical education is a revision. 2422, comprehensive health and physical education is a revision. 2467, surrogate parents and resources family parents, revised. 3134, assignment of extra duties is a revision. 3142, non-renewal of non-tenured teaching staff members, revised. 3221, evaluation of teachers, revised. 3222, evaluation of teaching staff members, excluding teachers and administrators, revised. 32223, I think I put an extra 2 in there. 3223, evaluation of administrators, excluding principals, vice principals, and assistant principals, revised. 3224, evaluation of principals, vice principals, and assistant principals, revised. 4125, employment of support staff members, revised. 4146, non-renewal of non-tenured support staff members, revised. 5111, eligibility of resident, non-resident students, revised. 5116, education of homeless children is a revision. 5330.01, administration of medical cannabis, revised. 5460.02, bridge year pilot program is a new policy. 6115-.01, federal awards, funds, internal controls, allowability of costs is new. 6115.02, federal awards, funds, internal controls, and mandatory disclosures is new. 6115.03, federal awards, funds, internal controls, conflict of interest is new. 6311, contracts of goods or services funded by federal grants, revised. 6471, school district travel, revised. 7432, eye protection, revised. 8420, emergency and crisis situations, revised. 8540, school nutrition programs, revised. 8550, meal charges, outstanding food service bill, revised. 8561, procurement procedures for school nutrition, revised. 8600, student transportation, revised. No, those are the first readings. The next ones are the eliminations. So these are all first readings, and we would move on the recommendation to approve of the first readings for all of those.
And then you got to do 13.03 for the abolished policies before we.
Oh, right, I am sorry.
No worries.
And then 1303, policies for abolition. We move on the recommendation of superintendent to abolish the following policies and regulations: 1648, restart and recovery plan; 1648.02, remote learning options for families; 1648.03, restart and recovery plan, full-time remote; 1649, Federal Families First Coronavirus Response Act; 8810, religious holidays; and the regulation 2421R, vocational technical education.
Okay, so we are looking for approval of items 13.02 to 13.03. Do I have a motion? And a second.
Second.
And questions or comments, although I wanted to make one quick comment that all of these first policy revisions, all of this first reading of the policies were a batch that were just kind of standard language revisions, and that the policy committee met this summer and is continuing to meet about larger issue policies that they will be presenting more information on. So just wanted to, I think I said that in the committee meetings, but just in case, wanted to make sure everyone was up to speed. Any other questions or comments from board members?
Can you make a similar statement about the policies that are being abolished? I'm assuming that some of them are either duplicative or.
Yes,
covering-
so, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, the ones that are being abolished were essentially eliminated by new statutes through COVID response. So obviously, with Governor Murphy saying that there's no longer going to be a virtual option, then our policies and procedures manual has to be updated to eliminate the options that Governor Murphy has said no longer exist.
We have an updated religious holiday count. We're not abolishing religious holidays. We have an updated religious holiday.
Correct.
Right, they're duplicates, or a new one has covered that information. Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Henry?
Yes.
Ms. Mello?
Yes.
Ms. Rivera?
Yes.
Mrs. Severino?
Yes.
Ms. Sheridan Celia?
Yes.
Mr. Stotts?
Yes.
Mrs. Caden?
Yes. And then section 14, not so much policy, more miscellaneous now. 14.01 is the 21-22 school year district professional development and mentoring plans that was attached for your review. And there are no HIB reports for this month, or this past month, excuse me. So we're looking for approval of item 14.01. Do I have a motion? And a second.
Second.
Questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Henry?
Yes.
Ms. Mello?
Yes.
Ms. Rivera?
Yes.
Mrs. Severino?
Yes.
Ms. Sheridan Celia? Mr. Stotts?
Yes.
Mrs. Caden?
Yes. And section 15 is our second opportunity for public participation. Please stand, state your name and address, and keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. This is a general public participation section. It is not just for items on the agenda. The public is reminded that attempts to resolve all concerns and complaints should first go through appropriate staff members and administrators. So if anyone would like to make a comment, please come forward now.
I'm not going to get too close to the mic because there's been a variety of people here. I'm Lori Kerfin. My address is 460 Center Street in Collingswood. I have 2 children at Tatum Elementary. Please pardon I was at home watching the Board of Ed meeting, and then I felt I needed to just come in. I wanted to reiterate the gratitude of the majority of parents in this district for pushing masks, keeping our kids safe, thinking through very carefully the steps we're going to take. I want to tell all of you thank you. Most of you are volunteers. I appreciate your time and your work, and I know this is really hard. As a parent, though, I did want to say that the lunch plan is terrifying. Like Kate, my kids don't go inside with their friends. They don't go anywhere without masks. Sorry, excuse me. And I had a kid who was very sick as a baby.
and he's okay now, but the thought of him becoming ill is terrifying. So I just want to urge everybody to please try to think outside the box. 45 children in one space without masks is not safe. They have classrooms. That would be less kids, even if there's 20 kids to a classroom. That is half the risk of 45 in a lunchroom space. If it's inclement weather, that's an option. At the camp, kids were allowed to bring towels. They could sit outside. At Tatum in particular, and I know most of the schools have a front area where there's grass and a playground area. I feel like if parents are willing to volunteer, there can be enough staff to keep kids safe. And 3 feet inside with Delta, it stays in the air for 16 hours. We don't have the luxury of 20 minutes. We're not playing the same game we were with Alpha. It is much more dangerous, much more transmissible. And the people that stood up here and basically lied because they're watching Fox News or whatever they're doing for their information, children are dying of COVID. Children are getting sick. The ICU beds are filling up. There was just a letter put out by all the pediatric hospitals in the country that was begging people to use multi-level protections for children because the cases are rising and the numbers are there. And that is science. And if you don't believe in science, that's your issue. If you want to pull your kids out because you don't believe in science, good luck to you. But we need to keep all the kids here safe. There are vulnerable children in this population. There are sick children in this population. There are kids with immune issues in this population, kids with learning disabilities. That's the higher good. So I really, please think about the lunch plan. It is not safe. Our children are not safe in that plan. And I'm on the verge of quitting the job I just got so I could put my kids out for lunch because I'm so scared. So please go back to the drawing board and come up with a different plan. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Michaela Crabtree. I live at 909 Linwood Avenue here in Collingswood. I have 3 kids now in our district. And I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Lori said, because my concerns are quite similar. Lunchtime scares me. I feel like the masking and the mitigation efforts during school, I think you're doing a great job. I think those are all things that need to continue. But then I feel like it all goes out the window at lunchtime. My kids also don't go inside anywhere. They have never been in a group larger than our immediate family, which is 5. So the thought of them being unmasked and eating and socializing for even 20 minutes makes me feel very unsafe. It makes them feel very unsafe. I have a daughter who's going to middle school, and she's practicing eating with her mask on. That to me seems unfair for her. So, again, please think outside the box, and, we're happy to help in any way that we can, volunteering-wise. But thank you.
Thank you to everyone for coming tonight. This is a tough time for everyone. Dr. McDowell, you wanted to say something really quickly?
So first and foremost, I want to thank every person for being here, every person that's watching. Especially I want to thank each of our community members who had the courage to come up and actually speak from the heart. We fully acknowledge and are assuming positive intent that the only thing that our community members want is the health and safety of their children. What we've heard loud and clear. We will be having ongoing conversations for the remainder of this week. Some of you will be receiving a phone call or an email in conjunction with some of the other feedback circles and loops that we have previously established. We're going to be looking at all options. We know, and we have been very transparent in areas that we struggled, and we shared back in April and May that our greatest concern was lunch. we are fully acknowledging that Delta is a very different disease. As a parent, my daughter attends the Preschool Penguins program. I am there with you. I have concerns and reservations equal to you as well. And I just wanted you, as a community, to hear directly that we do hear you, and we will be evaluating and increasing the options that were previously not fully explored. Thank you.
So please look out for additional information before school starts. Again, thank you to everyone for coming and participating in all of this with us, because that's the only way we're going to get through all of this. With that being said, we move to section 16, adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening.